I'm Kevin, and this is Novel to You, where I read from my novels, and you can listen to them while you're commuting or jogging, cycling, whatever you do. We're reading from Taemane, my book. We're on chapter 24, and this is episode 16. Here we go. Nick was having a late lunch on the veranda, as the mine was closed for the afternoon. It was a choice both Kate and Claire had insisted on, so he didn't care. But he would have to rein in both women and make sure that they would obey him. It was just a matter of time, but the sooner Alex was gone, the better. Nick saw Alex and Kate walk up to the house through the garden following the funeral. They were dressed in a somber black. Nick was enjoying his eggs, even if he did have to cook them himself. He spoke to the two of them without looking up from his eggs. "All done, then?" Kate dismissed him. "You could have attended." "Not my sort of thing. Didn't know him." He waved a fork at Alex. "Did they shore up the roof in the morning shift, Alex?" Alex watched the hyena-like jaws as they clamped down on the last scraps of his meal. "Yeah, the shaft is, it's safe after the blast." Nick looked up at the choice of word. He stared at the big black man. What does he know? "Yeah, unlucky that beam getting clipped. They always said it was low. It was unfortunate to lose, a worker." Kate snapped at him. "His name was Asif." Claire, who also didn't attend the funeral, barged through the door with her two small traveling cases. "Oh, thank God you're back. I was worried I wouldn't see you before I left. Everything go all right at the church then, did it?" She didn't wait for a response, as she was busy with her gloves and purse. "Unfortunate that, but, well, it's done." Alex stepped forward toward Claire. I'd like to make a suggestion, Claire." For the first time, Nick pricked up his ears and stopped stuffing his face, unsure of what Alex was up to. Claire ignored Alex. "Now, no mistakes while I'm gone. It's just 3 days to find this dress, so you shouldn't be able to cause too much damage." Alex was determined to make his point and raised his voice slightly. "I'd like to have Asif's widow receive his last month's full pay, plus something to help her along over the short term." Claire stared at him, dumbfounded by his forwardness. "Why?" Kate stepped past Alex. "Only you could make a comment as insensitive as that." "Well, sorry, but it won't bring him back, will it?" Alex nodded. "No, it won't. But it's an accident in the mine. She is pregnant, and it was their only source of income. It would be..." He trailed off, too embarrassed and astonished at Claire's utter disregard to finish. Nick felt it was time to cut in. "It's business. Accidents happen." Alex glared at him. "Accidents? Really?" "Claire, what would your father have done?" Claire sensed a fight brewing. "Look, we know he was your cousin, but..." Kate stepped over toward Nick. "You will take 6 months' wages over to his wife, Jamina, tomorrow night, Nick." He dropped his knife and fork and got up, but her finger pushed him into his chest, pushing him back to his seat. "You have a problem taking orders from your employer, security guard?" Claire cut in. "Oh, for God's sake, just do it, Nick, and let's be done with these two." George pulled up in a Land Rover at the bottom of the garden. "Oh, my ride is here." Alex picked up her bags and walked down to the car. Nick made no attempt to help. Claire came around the table, kissed Nick, then ran off to the car. Alex waited at the Land Rover and held the door for her. She got in without even a thank you. She waved animatedly at Nick as George released the clutch too quickly. Whether it was an intentional error or not, Alex wasn't sure, but it left Claire staring directly at Alex. They held each other's gaze while George struggled to restart the truck. An odd softening crossed Claire's eyes. She looked away, but then whipped back towards Alex. "Be safe, Alex. Take care of Kate. I know you will." A smile crept to the corner of her mouth. She looked down, and George pulled away. Kate caught Nick looking at her, and she sneered at him. He smiled with feigned innocence. She walked into the house. Nick played with the puddle of golden yolk egg on the plate. He tapped the fork. His mind toyed with the absence of Claire. Things had taken a setback, but maybe they could work to his advantage after all. Chapter 25. It was late, and there was no moon. The darkness smothered all shapes into a blanket of oneness. The Land Rover rolled to a quiet stop behind the fourth hut, just as One Eye had said. Nick stood in front of the door to Jamina's house. It still had the ribbon on the door. He waited. Duke watched from the truck. A snap of his fingers and the dog hurried to his feet. They both stood and listened to the night. It was still. Duke saw the eyes of a scraggy mongrel peer out from a cracked wall. The mongrel looked at the fangs of the killer dog and decided a challenge could be a fatal choice. It slinked back into its house. Nick pushed through the door without knocking. He closed it. It scraped slightly. He slid a board across, blocking it. Duke waited outside. The eyes of an old woman in a hut nearby opened with the creak of Jamina's door. She saw no one, just a sleeping dog. Nick's eyes darted around the room. It was of simple design, about 7 yards in diameter, divided into 2 sections by a curtain. On one side was the eating, sitting area with the table and basic cooking ware. The clay floor was polished, and it seemed to be a proud, though poor, home. A bedspring creaked as Jamina rose to see what the scraping sound was. She assumed it was one of her neighbors. She was wearing only a long-sleeved, loose-fitting nightshirt. Her eyes were puffy from hours of crying. Pulling the curtain aside, she was horrified to see Nick in her home. She instantly knew who he was from descriptions by the mine workers. Asif said Nick was evil. Nick stared lecherously at the young woman. Her round breasts turned him on, and very soon he'd be stuck with the bony Claire. He thought maybe a touch of black female wouldn't be a bad thing. "What do you want?" "Asif did well with you, didn't he? What do you want?" Nick reached for a packet in his shirt and tossed it on the table close to him, so she must cross over and get it. "That's for you, from the mine." "Thank you." "You come over and open it up." She hesitated, not wanting to get too close, but in the end felt she must. She edged over and reached across the table for it. He pinned her hand down on top of the package and stepped behind her. She froze. "The mine wants to help you." "I want to help you too." He slid his hand quickly up her nightshirt and grabbed her hard between the legs. She gasped and then tried to scream, but he muffled her with his other hand. He whipped his hunting knife out and pressed it against her throat. Her eyes blinked wide with terror. Her hands instinctively crossed her stomach, wanting to protect her young treasure. His fingers squeezed her mouth hard, driving the thumb and forefinger into the jaw socket. He stuffed a towel from the sink into her mouth. She gagged for air. He ripped a scarf off the suspended washing line and tied it around her mouth. She tried to swing at him, but he spun her and knocked her to the floor. She scrambled away on all fours, but his boot pushed her face down on the ground. He pulled the sleeves of her nightshirt behind her and knotted them, tying her hands behind her back. He lifted the nightshirt up, revealing her body, and rolled her over, face up with the nightshirt over her head. He placed a knee on her throat and undid his trousers. She was suffocating and wriggled to fight him off. She couldn't get free, and he flopped on top of her and held the knife to her throat. The old woman in the neighboring hut moved to her doorway and looked out. There was nothing, only blackness. She listened for the struggle she thought she had heard, but couldn't hear anything. Perhaps it was just the young girl having a nightmare again. The poor thing had been pacing every night and constantly crying, wailing for her husband. It would pass in time, the old woman thought, and she returned to sleep. He stood over Jemina. She lay on her side on the dirt floor. Her arms were still tied in the sleeves behind her back. Her nightshirt pulled up over her waist, exposing her buttocks and breasts. She curled into a ball. Her cheek was swollen and her nose was bloodied. The gag still pulled at her jaw, leaving her to snort and sniffle through her bloodied nose. She cried through the gag. Nick knelt in front of her and played with her. He then stood and poured the envelope of money over her, a final insult. "There you go. Payment in full. Good body like that, you'll do fine. Who knows? Maybe I'll visit you again. Fresh black whores like you are good to find, but the police don't much like them. You came at me. You sold yourself. You wanted more money. So, you better keep quiet. You just keep it between us. You won't get any help from the white police. Remember, I run the mine. I'll untie your hands. You just rest here." He untied her arms and sniggered at his conquest as she tried to cover herself with the nightshirt. She held her stomach. Soiled by the rapist, she tried to hide and shield her baby, tried to cling to some dignity. Her world, only 2 days before, had been alive and full of love. Now it was utterly destroyed. Did she exist? No. Did she want to exist? No. But she had Asaf's baby. He left her on the floor and slipped out the front door and around the hut to the Land Rover in the back. As he pulled away, the suspicious old woman definitely heard the engine and crossed to Jemina's. The door was slightly open. She saw the pregnant mother laying on the floor. The old woman went in and locked the door behind her. She undid the gag and held the distraught, shattered little woman, tending to the collapsing flicker of hope and pride that had made Jemina. Early the next evening, most of the men were making their way along the dirt track back toward the compound when their attention shifted. Even though they were tired, dirty, and wanted to just eat, then get some sleep, their focus was pulled away from the drudgery of the road. The Jeep roared through the front gate at a ridiculous speed, spraying them with a light ochre dust. The Jeep skidded to a halt in front of the main office. 6 of Nick's lackeys were playing with Duke among some oil drums, not far from the office in front of the repair shop. On seeing Alex, the dog leaped up to the alert, eager to attack. Alex jumped out of the cab of the Jeep. He foamed with rage. He had just returned from delivering some things to Jemina and found out about the rape. He ran to the mine office, threw the door open, and charged through. The door swung back shut behind him. Nick instantly saw Alex's anger and assumed he must have found out about the girl. He glanced across at the gun cabinet and made a lunge for it. Alex dashed over and punched him in the stomach with such force he flew back over his desk. "You bastard rapist, I'll kill you!" As Alex came around the decks, Nick struggled to his feet and drew his hunting knife. Alex, in a blind rage, grabbed him and hurled him across the room. Nick bounced off the wall and slashed out with the knife, cutting Alex's arm. He swung several more times before Alex caught his hand and slammed it on the diamond scale. The knife dropped from his hands and lodged point up inside the arms of the heavy metal scale. Alex punched Nick in the stomach and then again in the face. Nick fell back and returned with an iron hat stand. He swung wildly at Alex. The office was getting destroyed with each swing of the stand. Alex blocked the blow of the hat stand with an arm and then grabbed it, ripping it from Nick. He head-butted Nick square, breaking Nick's nose. Blood spewed from his nose down his white chest. He punched him again, and then Nick fell against the door. Alex raged forward, and they crashed through the door onto the outside step. The momentum carried both of them over the edge of the small veranda, and they fell to the ground amongst the wardens and Duke. Nick's face was bloody, and he spat streams of blood as he staggered to stand. Duke lunged for Alex, sinking his teeth deep into his shoulder. Alex ripped the dog off and hurled it into the drums where it stayed. He turned back to Nick, just as Nick pulled a shovel out from under the steps and swung it hard at Alex's back, knocking him to the floor. He raised the shovel high, tipped down, about to slam the blade down on Alex, when Alex rolled to the side and kicked Nick's legs out. Alex jumped up, dragged Nick up with one hand, and punched him in the face, splitting both of his lips. Alex hurled Nick into the drums. Alex rushed around the drum as Nick surfaced with an iron bar. He swung wildly at Alex, causing Alex to leap back, clear of the bar. Alex moved in to Nick's side and punched him in the kidneys. Nick slowed, but still tried to spin with the bar. Alex grabbed it, and the two men tried to wrestle it away from each other. Alex, being so much stronger, hurled Nick around as he refused to release the bar. Alex kicked him in the stomach and then in the testicles. He ripped the bar away, slamming it up under Nick's chin. Nick fell back, unconscious. Alex was about to bring the bar down on Nick's head when a pickaxe handle swing across the back of his knees caused him to crumple forward. Several more blows from the pickaxe smashed across his legs and broke several of his ribs. The wardens left the semi-conscious Alex and then turned their attention back to their boss. They lifted his groggy body from the dirt and carried him off to one of the mine buildings. After several seconds, Alex struggled to stand and searched for Nick. He assumed he must have gone off among the mine buildings. Alex stumbled between the buildings, looking for Nick. He was going to finish him off. He was going to kill him. Unable to find him, Alex stopped at a water trough to wash before going up to the house. Alex thought Nick must have realized it was over and done a runner. He pumped the well and washed under the running water. He was spitting blood from a split lip, and his arm was bleeding badly from the knife cut, though he didn't think it was that broken. The sound of the running water blocked out the approach of One Eye and 4 of Nick's lackeys. As Alex rinsed the blood from his mouth, the blow on his back from the iron bar caused water to spew from his mouth. He turned but was clubbed twice more in the ribs. Another caught his face, whipping his head to one side. Another blow from the iron pipe connected with his lower jaw and shattered it. He saw another blow coming down and held his arms up. The pickaxe angle broke, as did the bone in his arm with a sickly crack. He fell forward in pain, and they continued to kick and pound him with the iron bar in their boots. A dozen blows thundered down from the handles and the bars, pounding him into total stillness. They grabbed his feet and dragged him toward a jeep. His cheek, temple, and chin were a torrent of red. The bone jutted out where his left cheek was. One forearm bled from the knife wound. The other was broken at a right angle and dangled uselessly. There was a huge contusion on the left side of his head, and it had swollen up, larger than a man's fist. With numerous broken ribs, he was unconscious and very close to death. The 4 men struggled to get the heavy body into the back of the jeep. It flopped down with a thud. They jumped in the cab and roared, unnoticed, out of the mine. Only George, who had begun the final lockup, saw the figure being dropped in the truck. Perhaps it was a drunk, he thought, though that would be unusual. He had thought to approach them and then realized it was Nick's men who were doing the loading. He stayed in the shadows until they were clear, then hurried up to the big house. He was due to get Mary on her way to Marundi. Mary and Kate had just finished cooking and were cleaning up. On the central work table were 3 large pots, each with cloth coverings. The 2 women had prepared food for Jamina and her neighbors. It was meant to be a simple gift from Kate that wouldn't step on anyone's pride. Kate and Mary had been talking and cooking together for hours. It was like mother and daughter. Alex told me about your offer to Jamina. Oh, Mary, that's nothing. That's mine business. But we do need to help her more, especially with the baby coming. But you're going up against Nick and your sister. You be careful, Kate. Don't worry. You know how ruthless Dad could be sometimes. Claire has that, I know. But so do I, Mary. Well, she certainly does, but there might be more of your mama in you, you know. Well, Alex is very late, Kate said. Oh, I told you, didn't I? Maybe I forgot. I'm getting so old. He went over to Jamina's with some baby clothes and some things I didn't need. But he'll be back soon. Heaven knows he couldn't stand all those women falling all over him over there. I think he feels responsible for Asif because he got him the job here." Kate pondered her thoughts. "It was an accident." "Yes," Mary said, "I suppose. But it still plays on his mind. I'm going over whenever that old dawdler George gets up here. You can come with us, Kate. You're always—" "Thank you, Mary, but I'll wait for Alex." "It's all ready. You just have to warm it, all right?" That's all right, Mary. We can't have you cooking for us forever." Mary smiled at Kate and stroked her chestnut hair. She gave it a ruffle. "Yeah, Alex, he chose his girl well." She wrapped the little woman in her arms and then abruptly pulled away. She walked to the kitchen, to the back door, screaming for George. Kate was left thinking of her previous night with Alex. She would have him in her bed at last. They could read, play chess, and then maybe tonight they could make love. Claire should go away more often. The Land Rover bounced wildly across the grass savanna as Alex's unprotected skull slammed up and down on the bed of the truck box. Once they were a good 30 minutes from the main road, the men got out and cautiously looked around. They were at least 15 miles from the mine in the open bush. They grabbed the unconscious body and dragged it off the truck bed. It flopped in a heap on the ground. They tried to drag it a good distance from the truck, but being heavy and not wanting to linger in the savanna grass at night, they were quick to abandon the body. "Ah, hell with it. That's far enough. Mad dogs and hyenas will have him in no time." One Eye and two of the wardens jumped back in the cab and drove off, showering the body of Alex in dirt. And that's the end of chapter 25. And that's the end for today. Thank you for joining me. We are reading Taemane, and I'll see you in the next one, which will be episode 17. Thanks for now.